Welcome back to the Boys in Motion podcast. We're your hosts, Brian, Andrew, and Tyler. And today we're super excited because this week is a huge week. It's race week of the BIM 5K. Now, whether you're listening to this actually this week upon release or whenever in the future, this is an essential guide and really a key strategy on how to race and pace yourself for 5Ks. We're talking about how to prep smart, pace right, and run your fastest 5K ever. So whether you're aiming for a PR or you just want to finish strong without blowing up, we've got you covered.
Now don't you get it twisted. The 5K is a deceptively tricky race. It's short enough that you feel like you can go absolutely all out, but it's long enough that with bad pacing, you can get absolutely wrecked. We're going to break down the best warm-up routine, pacing strategies, and mental hacks that you can use to execute perfectly on race day.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I got to listen up on this episode, guys, because I still have not paced a 5K properly. I learned it the hard way. Every single race, I feel like I keep learning it the hard way. Go out way too hot and just hit the wall, go lizard mode, and just try to hang on until the end and never end up hanging on, let's just say.
Yeah, well, this episode is made so that you don't make those same mistakes. Like we said, this is an essential guide for anybody who's racing the BIM 5K or any future 5K. But we're really excited for the opportunity to host everybody this weekend at Merritt Island in Welland. If we were to go around the table just before we really get into the meat of the episode, what are you guys each most excited about for the BIM 5K?
I can kick this one off, and I'm super excited. This BIM 5K, I will not be, well, as long as Logan is showing up and potentially other people, I will not be the last person to start the BIM 5K. And I'm excited for that feeling of being chased by a speedy boy. And hopefully I won't let him pass me.
Actually being chased this time, what a concept. It's going to be awesome. I'm most excited to see all the people. We have about 150 people towing the line here at Merritt Island, and we're going to be packing up that path and getting a lot of people out there enjoying the nice snacks, prizes, and a lot of fun with the community.
Yeah, this will be our most attended event, which is super thrilling. I think there's people who are coming that aren't even racing just to spectate, which is huge. We've got a great lineup of volunteers that are going to help with the day. We'll have snacks, we'll have coffee, and it's going to be a fantastic day. I'm really excited. Now, one development that makes this 5K better than any other BIM 5K we've done is the beautiful timing system that Andrew has set up. And that's something that I'm really excited to see in production. We're going to have bibs for people. They'll have QR codes. We're going to have the same kind of staggered start. And then as you cross that finish line, we're using QR code image recognition to end kind of your running time. And that will all be automatically fed into this beautiful app that Andrew created. So I think that like technology piece to the race is something I'm really excited to see happen. And I really think this could be something we sell under the BIM brand to other pockets of athletes around the globe someday.
I'll call the CTO, get him going here.
Oh yeah, we're upping our production value this time around. We spent lots of time developing and testing this system, so hopefully it all goes without too much of a hitch, but we have some backups in place if anything happens on race day, but it should be good, and hopefully it gives a good timing, accurate system, because I know all of us runners, we know in past races, there's been asks to check the exact timing because our camera system just wasn't quite good enough. So we're leveling up here at BIM.
A lot of R&D going down, and I think, that interface will be super clean. A lot less stressful, too, at the end, trying to calculate what the heck's going on with the times and all that. We could just sit back and enjoy with everybody else, so should be really nice.
Yeah, so a lot to look forward to. I can't wait to have the recap a week from now. as well. And hopefully it's a successful day for the three of us. Hopefully we can all push out really good times, and hopefully we see some other PRs from the whole group, because everybody's got a lot of training in their legs, and I think the timing's just right for this event.
And to kick off this episode, especially with the BIM 5K being a staggered start, it is super important to have kind of a rough ballpark of what your 5K pace will be, since we will be asking you your predicted time at registration. So we're going to kind of give a little bit a test to try to figure out where you're at and kind of your predicted time that you think you might be running this 5K in. So the first, and this is kind of a tried and true, is using a recent race data. We've talked about this in the past about the VDOT system, and that is using, and in this case, something pretty similar to the 5K would be best. So whether that's if you've done a 10K race or kind of time trial effort, if you've done a mile, or if you can hit the road and do a fast mile, that is a good indicator to put into the VDOT calculator to try to see what that predicted 5K time might be.
Exactly. So a recent race data is kind of the gold standard, or even that previous PR. Maybe you're looking to kind of beat that, so you might go down 30 seconds from what you most recently ran a 5K in. But yeah, the VDOT calculator is something I use for all of my training and then also my race pacing. And that's vdot.com. Would recommend to everybody. The second way that you can kind of estimate and ballpark your 5K race pace is actually using some of your most recent workout as indicators. So an example there would be if you can hold a certain pace, for example, in a interval workout where you're doing 3x1K or 3 by a mile intervals, or even like 3 by 5 minutes, whatever that might be. Those kind of hard pieces that are in the ballpark of like 20 minutes or less could give you an indication of where your race pace will be. Likely, if you're doing like shorter intervals, you kind of need to add a few seconds to calculate what your 5K would be, but at least it gives you some knowledge about where you might be, because you're pushing at maximum effort during those intervals, and you will be pushing at maximum effort during the 5K as well.
Yeah, and try to stay consistent with that effort throughout your training and try to level up. I think another way to do it too is just going out for a classic old TT, just do a time trial, kind of like what you mentioned, Brian, do either your 15, 20 minute all out effort, see what you could get at that effort level for that time, or also you can do just a actual time trial like distance. So either a 5K or a 10K, even you could do a 8K or something like that. Just try to increase your time under that faster pace. So that's another way to kind of extrapolate your timing for what you want that 5K to be.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think also like anybody who ran around the Bay recently could also put that race in as their time trial or like their hardest effort. If you felt you really went for it in the 30K, the 15K, or the 5K at around the Bay, that's a perfect session to then throw in the VDOT calculator as well, because it was pretty recent. And yeah, I mean, it was a race, so you should be near that race pace. I think the one danger here is overestimating. I think it's much more enjoyable for you to set a pace that you kind of know you can hit, or you're right on the edge of, than to try to bite off too much and go out way too fast. I think overestimating how much you can push in that 5K is a big mistake.
Yeah. Don't go giving any crazy times just because at one point you were super fit and this time you think you can match it. Try to look at your data, make sure that let's say you did a 3x1 mile session and you were blasting it during those miles, but then on the track, on the ground, needed to take 20 minutes between sessions. That's probably not your 5K pace. But let's jump in to pre-race prep, specifically warm up and nutrition, because this will be a little bit different, especially if you're right off of around the bay. And for these shorter distances, there are some different things to take into consideration. And I think for me, the biggest one that I'm not necessarily as used to doing is that warm up piece. With the longer distance races, you can kind of settle in to your pace a little bit, and you actually don't want to do too much of an intense warm up since you have enough distance to cover during the race. But for a 5K, you're going to be blasting off at record speeds. So you definitely want to do a pretty good warm up, starting with a nice 10 to 15 minute jog, maybe some followed by some dynamic stretches, drills. Maybe a couple good classics are ABC skips, high knees, butt kicks, strides, and then the cherry on top is some race pace strides. You always see the professional athletes on the track blasting off, doing strides, slowing down, slow jog back. That's super important to just get the legs ready for the pace that they're about to endure.
What I like is seeing Andrew doing these warm ups, doing these things before our races, and I basically just copy paste. It's nice. I could just watch him and do exactly what he says, just like a master at his craft. So it's really great to see.
Yeah, and I think on the day of the BIM 5K and like any staggered start race, you kind of need to do this timing by yourself, and you need to make sure that this warm up that might take you about 10 to 20 minutes is something that you kind of do before you start, but you don't want to do it an hour before you start and then sit around for 40 minutes. You really want about like 5 to 15 minutes between the end of your warm up and when you actually start that race. So you need to be mindful, and you kind of need to set yourself up for success to get the most bang for your buck out of that 5K warm up.
Now let's talk about that carb load. And unfortunately, because I love a good carb load, for the 5K, it's not as important. You're not going to be blowing through those glycogen stores like in a marathon. So the night before, you still want nice balanced carbs and hydration with some electrolytes, but you don't need to overdo it. You don't need to do a massive carb load for a 5K and then just morning of, same as you've been doing during your training, light digestible carbs, maybe banana, peanut butter on toast, a small coffee if you're used to taking in caffeine, and then 30 to 60 minutes before, maybe just a small carb boost, whether that's a gel, honey, a nice shot of maple syrup, and then maybe another blast of caffeine. I think caffeine for a 5K, kind of setting it up about 20 minutes before is a good strategy, again, if you've done it in training.
I might have to try that. You're making me want that caffeine, and I know Brian loves that little shot of honey right before a nice run, so we might have to whip out a couple things out of the bag here for the 5K.
Yeah, totally. And I remember the last 5K we lined up for, where you and I both PR'd, Andrew, right before, maybe 10 minutes before, we both took a caffeine gel. And I think that could have made all the difference. And we'll have coffee on the spot. So if anybody needs a little shot of coffee right as they're approaching that start line, we got you covered there too.
Now we're going to jump into pacing. And I think to kick us off, I think from the last BIM 5K, Brian, you were the one that was your race that you were preparing for. So tell us a little bit about what you were thinking about that pacing strategy going into it.
Yeah, so pacing to me in a 5K, I actually, and you'll love to hear this, split it into miles instead of kilometers. And that's because I like to think of this as a race of thirds. You have your first third, your middle section, and then your final stretch. So right when you get off the start line, you can go way faster than your 5K pace and it will feel comfortable. Now that's a problem because that means you're getting sucked into the adrenaline, and you don't want to do that. You can kick a little bit right at the start just to feel fast, but really you need to, within that first like 400 to 500 meters, really find that controlled effort, settle in exactly to that pace you want to hit. I think even like 1 or 2 seconds over or under that pace is also perfect, but you really, really, really need to figure out how to settle in as fast as you can. Once you've found that rhythm in that middle section, once you've kind of come through that first kilometer and a half, that first mile, this is where you're trying to really start to hold on, because that whole first third is not very difficult. It's fast, but you're setting yourself up to pace for this whole effort of 5K. So that first mile isn't actually that hard. Not mentally, not physically. Your heart's going to be beating fast. You're going to be trying, but it's not going to hurt that much yet. This middle section is where you find that rhythm, and you actually need to really start to hold that pace that you started setting in that first mile. This is where really that mental game kicks in, where you start grinding away at the distance. And this is where it starts to get really, really tough, especially when you hit that turnaround point. I always find the halfway mark is where it really starts to suck for me. Do you guys feel the same way?
For me, it sucks the whole time. I just can't figure it out, but I'm listening here, and I think I'm going to do the thirds rule. I just trying to see how to split it up on my watch and how it shows, but I don't know. I got to be honest, the whole thing sucks for me. I just do not look forward to the 5K.
No, it's a searing pain, and that's for sure. So yeah, so you've kind of gone through this first third, you've started to hold this middle section, and at that turnaround point, if it's an out and back, which the BIM 5K is expected to be this week, this is really where the mental games start to come in. You start to question whether or not you can hold that pace. It really starts to be a searing pain everywhere. You don't know that you can move your legs fast enough. You don't know that your heart's not going to explode, and your lungs feel like they're on fire. And everything in your body starts to begin to shout, stop, slow down, you can't do this.
This is when you basically, yeah.
It's almost, I'm getting emotional here just talking about it. Like I feel my lungs like contracting. It's stressful. But that's part of the love of the game. That's why the 5K is so awesome, because it's so hard, but it's also pretty quick. Now, once you've come through, I think, the 4K mark. So really like you're doing that middle section, it's a little bit longer of like a hold, but once you have about 1 kilometer is where I think you can start biting and attacking a little, because it's a short enough time to the finish line where you don't need to pace yourself. You need to start trying to kick towards that line. And I think that real kick for me generally happens at like the 800 meter mark, but certainly by that last 400 meters, you should be pushing to empty that tank. You shouldn't be able to sprint faster in the last 200 meters than you were doing at the 400 meter mark or at the 600 meter mark. By that point, it's just you're hanging on to whatever your feet can do as you fall forward at full steam. So that's kind of what I think it is. Whether or not you're trying to negatively split that or even pace that, I think a lot of those like emotions and that feeling stays the same. Negative splitting can kind of make that first bit of the section a little bit easier, but by the end, it's still that searing pain. What do you guys think actually works better, negatively splitting or evenly pacing?
Well, that's what I was wondering. I want to hear from Andy Man himself. I was going to come out at a split even 4 minutes along the dot, but I know me, I'll come out hard, might be under that 4 minutes, and then I'll be catching my breath till the end. So I'm not sure if I should lay back off of the gas pedal a little bit and come in a bit hotter.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think I'm pretty well known for going off very hot and then having a pullback, like a very intentional pullback at like 600 to 800 meters, and then having that steady middle, and then again having that strong kick. So I'm looking at my last BIM 5K. So I negative split it, I positive split it. First mile, 5:12 minutes per mile, since we're talking about miles here. Second, a 5:32, and that's where I very intentionally pulled it back to kind of closer to where I should be. And then the third was 5:21 with the last 0.1 at a 4:54. So I really do think it's a go out at a pace you think you can hold and just try to hold it as much as you can. And I think it's tough to try to go out so hard and then try to negative split the 5K. I think you're setting yourself up to maybe not do that in a 5K, since you're not necessarily in control in a 5K as much as the longer distances.
Yeah, I agree. I think the 5K, it hurts so much whether or not you try to negatively split it or not. And the last thing that you want to be doing is in like that third, fourth, and fifth kilometer, be trying to make up time that you skipped when it was kind of easy at the front end. So I think like going out hard and almost having like a curved race where you're fast, holding fast is a pretty good way to think about it. But like negatively splitting, I think is a very challenging thing to do in a 5K if you're really trying to maximize it, because I think you at a certain point want to just be trying to hold on. That being said, at the upper echelon of the sport, a lot of it is kind of like hold on and then try to outkick your opponents. But they're all at the top level where they're racing against each other. This is really racing against yourself. So I think there's a little bit of a different dynamic.
I think though with the staggered start, it's real nice that opportunity to kick at the end with doesn't matter what pace you're running at, but you could chase that other guy and try to beat him to the finish line. So that'll be pretty fun to see some of those little battles within the race we're gonna have. So I'm looking at my stats here from the past BIM 5K I guess it was last spring on the same course, and I came out a bit hot, but I did keep. Now I'm going back to kilometers. I came out hot at a 352 for the first mile, and then I did a 404, 404 for the other 2 miles. So I couldn't quite hold on to that sub 20, but it's a game of seconds here, and I'm just trying to shave those off. With the shave,
Yeah,
maybe it'll help.
and I think that's a little bit like, especially when you are so close to your forecasted time and something like that. I think maybe it was just slightly too aggressive in that first little bit. But this time you might have me sitting beside you for that first little bit, and then we'll just try to outkick each other at the end. So you might be able to pace closer to that 4 minute for the first kind of 3K.
I'm excited. I can't wait. And I can't wait to see what people could do too. It's going to be awesome. Everybody's going to be trained with that around the bay. We'll have enough miles in our legs. No one will be just going out for a willy-nilly run, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, so one thing about pacing as well, and there's a few factors that the BIM 5K we like purposely designed not to have, which is like there's no crowded start, so you're not having to like juggle to race around people who might not be at the same pace as you. And there's also very minimal hills. There's a tiny dip probably below Woodlawn, but that's like not that extreme of a hill. But the one thing I have a question for you both on is how do you handle the turnaround? Because it's a tight turnaround, and you're at that point at the 2.5K mark, you feel like you're sprinting basically. How do you think about that turn, and how do you set yourself up successfully for it?
I think, especially with it, it's kind of a hairpin turn, nice and sharp. I know in the past we've done it kind of around a tree to kind of make it a little bit more gradual, but I would say slow down just a little bit and then decelerate, and then as you make the turn, and then kind of have a quick turnaround and then settle back into pace. You don't want to try to just like have a hard stop and turn, because that would not be good for the ankle. So a little slow down and then a little bit of a kick, and then right back to that boring middle of the 5K where you're just trying to hold on.
Right, so it's
With the high heels, you don't want to fall over.
that's true, but it's not like you're doing like the suicide's drill kind of touch on the line. You're really like doing a full turn.
I would do a full turn. I would kind of go to the outside of the path. You'll be running on the right in our case. Kind of go all the way to the outside and then make a wide turn. Yeah, depending on what shoes you're wearing. Yeah, doing that suicide would not be great. And that would kind of stop you in your tracks. With this kind of just a small deceleration to just keep going.
Very nice. Okay, so we've talked about how to pace it. We've talked about how to figure out what your pace is. But the race in itself, yes, it's a physical battle, but it's also a huge mental battle. So do you guys have any kind of tips or thoughts on how you mentally handle the 5K?
So Tyler, I'm looking directly at you because you mentioned that Merritt Island 5K we did, and I remember when I passed you, you were having a day. I think you went out a little bit too hot, so I'd like for you to just run it back a little bit of what you were thinking in that moment. I remember it was just after the Woodlawn dip too. So yeah, what was going through your mind and how'd you get yourself to that finish line?
I was gonna say you're giving me PTSD here. I was feeling great for the first 2K, and then I was like, what is going on here? Why am I out here? I went out way too fast. Felt like I was in no man's land. But I think in general, like obviously looking back at it, is like splitting it up into like sizable chunks. Hey, even looking at the trees, like okay, we'll make it to this next tree, next 200 meters. Oh, there's a dip. Okay, I'm gonna get through this section. Turn around. Okay, next section. You could hopefully see people as well on the course. Hopefully not blowing past you like I've had happen in the first couple times. But you just try to, I think, bite it out into different chunks. No matter what size of race, I kind of like doing that as my strategy. You could be out there all day or for 20 minutes. It's kind of the same strategy. You split it up. And obviously, we talked about thirds, but in general, I like splitting things up into threes. So either the distance, okay, it's going to be 3 times. You just play mind games, right? So you're always trying to beat that mental game and the mental hardship of the 5K. It's going to be tough, but it's always fun.
Yeah, and I think on that like mental side, the one motivating thing about the BIM 5K specifically is the staggered start means that you're going to be finishing with people who maybe you didn't start with. And so I always like to think like when I'm passing people on the way out, I'm thinking like, okay, if I just keep pushing, I'm going to be catching them. And I make it a goal, especially kind of like in the 500 meters approaching that turnaround. I'm looking at everybody. I'm ready to gobble them up in the last 500 meters of the race. So I think that like pretending to chase people down and trying to hold people off behind you is something that is a good visualization trick for me.
And last but not least, and this is something I often do, especially in longer races, but because I find sometimes in 5Ks my brain just doesn't work very well, so mantras, I just forget them, they go out the window. But using mantras to kind of break it up and to have specific sections, whether that's, that middle section, you want it to be strong and smooth, and you just keep repeating that in your head as maybe your form starts to break down. Strong and smooth, strong and smooth, strong and smooth. Stay in control. Or other thing to do is like cues. For in a 5K, quick arm swing, and just bringing every time, if your arm swing starts to kind of get sloppy, you get the Adam special where you just get the noodle arms. You just get the arms up, swing the arms. That last final kick, just think about your kick, snappy off the ground, and just kind of have those cues in your head that you want to be practicing at different points in the race.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because when you first started talking mantras, I wanted to add on that point. I love the like drive the arms to build some speed. I also think like just looking at the person, if there's somebody in front of you trying to match their cadence or go faster than their cadence, really try to like think about anything you can do to take your mind off the pain to a certain extent. It is a good game to play with yourself. And then also mental strat for me is try your best not to be looking down at your watch very often because the meters, they don't melt away as fast as you think they should when you're running, and you also don't, it's not efficient to be always looking down at your watch. So you've kind of settled into that pace. Trust your body, trust the feel, and look at it maybe at the turnaround and a few times, but don't be somebody who like every 500 meters you're looking at your watch because you're just playing a dangerous game and it kind of makes it feel longer.
Yes, I'm doubling down on this point. During a 5K, other than my initial check, which I normally do at 600 to 800 meters to be like, am I way under? Do I need to pull it back or just carry on? I am not looking at my watch. One, the effort is too high, and yeah, just go off effort. You should be kind of right at the brink of wanting to fall apart and just ride that line until the finish line.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I'm going to really have to take that into consideration. I'm a watch fiend. I'm glued to the watch. I'm glued to the heart rate, which heart rate doesn't matter during a 5K. So even changing my watch face to not show that heart rate will, I think, stress me out less. And I want to get into those 180s, 190s. I don't think I go past 180 in those races, so I got to try harder, basically.
Just stick with me, Ty, and we'll get you there.
Oh God, baby.
I think that's going to be seriously the play with you and I is like those first like 3K, maybe even 4K we'll be rolling together and then really see what we can do in that last bit. Because my goal is to be like, I would be happy with another sub 20 because I haven't put in like the serious speed training block that I did last fall. So if I can kind of like hold that time PB by 1 second, that would be huge. But I think that no matter what, that first 4K will kind of be at the same goal time as you.
I'm good at staying on a rope. I'll just stay on your hip and hold on for dear life. Get the lizard eyes going right off the bat, and we're good to go.
That's ideal. I can't wait. But that kind of sucks. You're just going to be sitting behind me, drafting, sucking the soul out of me, which sucks.
That is another thing, and kind of you mentioned of kind of more people at the top level of the sport. Although longer distances, I mean, you still get the tactics and stuff and sitting on people's slipstream, but in the 5K, being able to turn off your brain and let someone, Brian, in Tyler's case, just pace for you is huge. If you don't need to think about pushing that hard and at that pace, it helps so much in a 5K when you're really pushing that hard.
I think that's my strategy. Just get a pace bunny that'll do 3/4 of the way for you, and then hope he does the rest too.
Well, yeah, and I think the coffee club guys, they had a Q&A recently, and this was something that they talked about was, yeah, like if you have a pacing partner who's always just sitting in your draft, like sure you're doing more work, so you're technically training better, but it's like very tough mentally if you're always the person leading. So if you're going out in like a pack with somebody who is right around your speed, you can start to play those games, which is another great distraction away from the pain, right?
That is true. And on that point, me and John have been doing some of his marathon workouts together, and I just join in for the fun of it, I guess. But a lot of them have been these lactate efforts, and it's actually working out pretty well when we like take turns leading. And it's kind of like unspoken. Someone has a pull, and then like it slowly shifts, and then the other guy has a pull, and it really helps break up that effort, and also like you said, kind of distract you from the bigger goal there, and just trying to stay on either the guy's hip or make sure he doesn't catch up to you. So it's a good tactic.
Yeah, it's good when you can go back and forth. I think it was like the coffee club reference was somebody who like it was an ask me anything, and the person asked like my training partner never takes the front. Like how do I friggin' tell him to kick rocks basically?
Just fart on him.
That's true. That's one way to get him off your tail. I might need to pull that move at the 4,500 meter mark.
Yeah, just
Gas
break the rubber band and leave him in the dust. That's what you do.
No chance. You're already gonna do that on the bike. I don't need that on the run too.
So this leads me into, I think, a good take for a 5K. I don't think you guys will disagree. I think this is the essence of what we want to kind of promote for the BIM 5K, especially for those who are really pushing to dig deep and get those great times, is if your last 400 meters, your last 800 meters is an absolute pain, you didn't race it hard enough. Thoughts, feelings?
100% agree. You should be every single meter of that last 400 meters, you should be like, can I please stop? But the beautiful thing about the BIM 5K, and that races in the past where there's not very many people to catch, it's not very fun because you're working so hard to catch no one. But at the BIM 5K, hopefully there will be lots of people to catch. So lots of motivation to push through the pain.
The photo finishes. I just can't wait for that. And I know people are at different paces, but everyone at the end, it feels like it's slow-mo, just sprinting to the finish. And, you could have a 30-minute 5K or a 20, and you're still trying just as hard at the end, which is amazing.
Yeah, I do always giggle though at the people who quote their time way higher than they actually end up running. I think like there's always those few people that end up closing out the race like 5 minutes faster than their predicted time. And they don't get that pleasure because they're always just in the lead of the race.
I think that's a call out to some of the boys, the BIM.
Yeah, I mean, if it becomes a problem, we've joked about it before, but we might need to introduce a Sandbagger award. I know there was someone that finished way ahead because we did the deltas for the last BIM 5K, and I joked with him that I was going to get big bags of sand just delivered to his apartment. So watch out. Watch out if you give us inaccurate times.
I like this. I actually think this should be an award. I will feel bad if it's a total stranger who gets it, but I 100% think we should be bringing a sandbag to the race as the trophy for the person with the highest delta from their race time. At least the person who like beats it by the most amount of time.
I agree. I'm on board. I agree if it's like a some 12-year-old that has like never ran and just like 40 minutes and runs 35. I'd feel pretty bad giving a bag of sand to a 12-year-old, but I agree. We should have it hidden just in case.
So I think that's fine if the 12-year-old has beat their pace, but I'm also thinking like it shouldn't be like absolute delta where somebody who's like way over their time actually ends up doing it because they like totally bonked during the race, and it's somebody who said they'd hit 25 and end up running it in 35. That would be a little bit rude, but the sandbag for the fastest relative finish would be nice. I like that idea.
And especially if it's a BIM, a true BIM.
Oh yeah, like if it's friggin' Adam or Mark.
Friggin' Adam or
There
Mark.
has been some BIMs that have known to sandbag, so
Yeah. I'll bring some personal sand from up here.
We're talking about the boys, but I think some of the girls in motion, some of the girls who are coming, they're speedsters, and they might not have tested their speed so much. So I think the women's side of the race might have some real sandbaggers this year.
It's gonna be spooky. I'm gonna enjoy it.
yeah. Well, we've joked about it in the past, but I think this BIM 5K, I think that Easter Bunny's bringing that bag of sand for the biggest sandbagger. I think it's going to happen.
You heard it here. Fantastic. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode. If you're gearing up for a 5K or if you're going to be there this weekend, just remember, pace smart, prep right, and be ready to suffer a little bit or a lot of bit in that last stretch, because that's where the magic happens.
And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your best or worst 5K racing stories. So tag us on Instagram or drop a comment on YouTube with those stories. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with your running buddy who needs to hear about it.
And again, just your friendly weekly reminder that we're not medical professionals, just a bunch of dudes who love running and geeking out on endurance sports. So you can take our advice if you want, but listen to your body or medical professionals.
Love it. So no matter your time, show up, push yourself, have fun out there. The best race is the race that you leave nothing in the tank for, but we'll catch you on the next one.